How is everybody? Did with your work? Yesterday we gave some work. What was the work? Negrito, and then you were supposed to properly do with Risley, in the sense that you had to learn the map, you had to learn the criticisms, and sir, see to it that you finish your study and memorizing part along with the classes. Don't presume that you have understood and you can do sometime later, because later you would find that a lot of things are there which you will have to memorize, so it will be a difficulty. So pick up your rough sheets. First things first, pick up your rough sheets, and one of you can please come on to the board. Anybody who could? We want you to first give you the list of racial elements, whatever categories that he had mentioned, that, and then somebody else will come draw the map. The categories of races that was mentioned by Risley. आप लिखिए अपने बुक में, वो अपना करेंगे. I know you would want to get amused looking at others, but then आप नहीं थे क्लास में, आज पहला क्लास है. क्या नाम है? ब्यूटीफुल. अब ना मुझे कॉम्प्लेक्स हो जाएगा, आप इतना अच्छा लिखोगे तो फिर. How many? Great. మీద అయిపోయింది, రాస్తారా? రాయండి రాయండి, చేతులు కట్టుకొని కమ్మలు చూస్తున్నారు, సినిమా చూసినట్టే. వేర్ వర్ యూ డాక్టర్ సార్? నాట్ దేర్. బాగాలేదా? హెల్త్ బాగాలేదా? రావాలనిపించలేదా? పెద్దగా ఇంట్రెస్ట్ లేదా? అదే. You made Aryans Anglican people. That is a new theory actually. Aryans have come from England. Thank you so much. Somebody else who can draw the map. Thank you, sir. Very well. Sir, somebody else who can. Yes, sir, please. So, we have certain things to do today. I am airing a small documentary, very small one, which you would properly make a note of in the class itself, so that you don't have to. So, sir, in all probability, you'll be notified again on Friday, but in Aaj the Wednesday, in all probability, the ones that were late to join us, you would be having certain lectures on Saturday. Place and time, menu, and all that will be indicated to you eventually in the week. This is a small video which we will watch, Race and Racism. I really liked that. It addresses many of our questions. And then we would go to have a look at Guha, his classification. Sarkar, you'll do back home from the booklet. After Guha, see, I thought I would finish off these classifications with something else. So I would also be finishing off in that particular stream linguistic elements of Indian population. In order to do the linguistic elements, I do a bit of language. So kind of that's the target for the day. I repeat, we would begin with race and racism. We would look at Guha and his classification, because not much of it is there to write down. It's already there in your print. You'll have to understand what were the categories that he's mentioning, and bit of criticism you'll have to. I intentionally did not incorporate criticism in the booklet. We would be doing from the class, so you would scribble from the class. And then linguistic elements is something that we would continue to do. Some bit of fun out there. So let me. ఏమైంది బంగారం, ఎలా నవ్వావు? ఏం గుర్తొచ్చింది? ఏ కితకితలు? సమో చాలా ఫార్మల్గా ఉండాలనుకుంటాం క్లాస్లో, కానీ అవ్వదు కదా. సారీ. టెక్నాలజీ, హాజీ సార్. రేస్ అండ్ రేసిజం. చెప్పండి, అప్పటిదాకా వచ్చే వరకు కబుర్లు చెప్పండి. వాట్ మేడ్ యూ గివ్ దట్ కైండ్ ఆఫ్ నాస్టీ స్మైల్? ఏనా మెటీరియల్ లేదంటే నవ్వు వచ్చింది, కావాలని ఇవ్వలేదు కదా. అన్ని తింగర పనులు అలాగే చేస్తా ఉంటా. మొత్తం ఇచ్చేస్తే ఎట్లా, మీరు మా దగ్గర రావద్దు, అన్నీ ఇచ్చేస్తాం ఇంకా తీసుకెళ్ళిపో అని చెప్పి. In fact, a time తీసుకుంటుంది. In fact, there was a time when welcome. There, okay me. In fact, I at one point of time would never give dictations. Giving dictations, I used to think that is below the dignity of a teacher, kind of. Until the day came when my own brother started to take the exam. The first lesson he taught me was, जितना भी पढ़ाओ आप लिखवा दो थोड़ा सा. मतलब आप 1 घंटा पढ़ा दो, 10 मिनट लिखा दो. Only the 10 minutes will be the value of the class, not the 1 hour. Then I said, okay, fine, kind of. अभी आ गया तो देख.
Hey Rhonda, what's up?
I'm puzzled about something.
Is it something I can help you with?
Perhaps. In my anthropology class, our professor said there are no biological races in humans.
I had that class too. What's the problem?
She said there's no races, but we still have to answer questions about our race on things like census forms. People talk about race on the news and in my classes.
Yes, true. We hear about racial violence and racial discrimination.
So I don't get it. Why all this talk of race if races don't exist in humans?
Biological races don't exist in humans, but there are social races based on phenotype and geography. Racial classification began as far back as Egypt in 3000 BC. But we'll start with scientific racism in the 1500s. As Europeans began to discover civilizations and cultures in the Americas, Africa, the Middle East, and Asia, they associated the skin color of these people with behavior. Europeans measured these civilizations in comparison to their own, and designated them as savage. They began to assume that the level of these civilizations had something to do with their skin color or race. Europeans assumed these people were no better than animals. That attitude made colonizing their land and enslaving them easy. They felt that these people needed Europeans to help civilize them. In 1735, Carolus Linnaeus constructed a taxonomy that divided Homo sapiens into 4 races. Linnaeus's divisions were by skin color, and geography. white Europeans, red North American Indians, yellow Asians, and black Africans. Johann Blumenbach came up with a 5-part system based on physics. Asians, and black color and geography. White Europeans, red North American Indians, yellow Asians, and black Africans. Johann Blumenbach came up with a 5-part system based on physics. Physical features including skin color, hair color, and facial features.
What was the point of it all? Didn't people know that there aren't biological races in Homo sapiens?
No, they didn't know. No one really understood it until the late 20th century, when anthropologists began to take a different approach that discredited the race concept. First of all, human genetic traits vary in clines. Clines are gradual shifts in gene frequencies. This fact is incompatible with discrete and separate races. A race is supposed to reflect shared genetic material, inherited from a common ancestor. But early scholars used phenotype traits like skin color. The problem is that these traits are inherited independently. Eye color and skin color are inherited separately, so that a person can have dark skin and blue eyes. Another problem is that so-called races are not biologically distinct. Many populations don't fit neatly into the categories like Caucasoid or Negroid. For example, Australian Aboriginals, Melanesians and some Africans look phenotypically very similar, but it doesn't make sense to categorize them all as Negroid.
If we are all very similar to each other genetically, and there has been gene flow among even seemingly ill-ordered populations, why does race still exist?
Social race, that is, race that is a cultural construction, does exist. Social race is a form of social organization. People use social race as an excuse to do some pretty horrible things to other people.
Yes, like Hitler in Nazi Germany, trying to exterminate the races he thought were inferior. Thousands of Jews and Gypsies, and people from other ethnic groups, were killed.
Racism in the United States can be traced directly back to slavery. Although the Emancipation Proclamation freed all the slaves, white people wanted to keep blacks in a lower social position so they could continue to feel superior. Jim Crow laws and separate but equal policies were part of that legacy.
All of that, based on a false premise.
Yeah, people can be pretty awful sometimes. Did you know, early scholars thought that people from other races had lower IQs than whites?
Seriously? You've got to be kidding. IQ tests are problematic because it's hard to define just what intelligence is, let alone measure it. Most IQ tests simply measure cultural knowledge.
Neil deGrasse Tyson, the physicist, hasn't made his IQ public, but no one who's heard him speak or read some of his work would doubt he's a genius.
It's all about environment and opportunity. Any kid who gets good nutrition, a great education, and other opportunities, has the potential to be successful and intelligent.
Sounds to me like you've answered your own question.
Yes, I guess I did. Why don't we go get a coffee? I could sure use a donut right about now.
Sounds good. And I think it's my turn to buy.
I thought that was answering many of your questions. Like, whether we can categorize based on genetic makeup, why should we actually look at physiological features? I mean, the very obvious visible features. And then there is a difference between sociological race and a biological race. The fact that there are no biological races today is actually understood by people very much. अच्छा ये एक और वीडियो है which you will do back home. I won't do it here. आप आराम से घर पे कर लेना. That is the topic actually. We will be uploading on your portal, but then biological race in the absence of biological races. That was a TED talk by a gentleman. And so basically, I didn't want you people to sleep off in the class listening to him for about 16 minutes there. So you can back home write quietly. तो इसको अगर जब तक आपको टाइम लगता है by the time we actually upload. In the meantime, you can perhaps.
Before I get started, I must say, can you guys hear me? Okay, before I get started, I must say that some of you may be a bit uncomfortable with my talk today. My talk is on race. And we know race is a very contentious topic, right? For a long time, in particular here in the United States, race has been one of those enigmas, very complex set of variables, meaning biology and the environment. And so when you think about race and how the human species are distributed across the world, over the last several hundred years, there's been a lot of discussions in terms of naming these races and what are these so-called races. And so today I'm going to talk some about the biology of race and how race is problematic in biomedical research, okay? So I say it's problematic because if you look through the literature in biomedical research or in the popular press, we're hit every day with these ideas that race predicts disease or race impacts one's health, right? So what does that mean? Does that mean that, for instance, African Americans have a higher risk for prostate cancer or higher incidence of stroke? Does that mean that there's some biological sort of risk factors that the African Americans have? Or does it mean that the environment is playing a role? And so when we use race, it's very difficult to tease apart the risk factors.
Do things in a much better way. You will be able to give very contemporary references and examples. People think that the discipline is static. It is not so static as people think it is. Chaliye, don't yawn now. I'm starting. జీవితంలో నాకు అత్యంత చిరాకైన వస్తువు అదనమాట. So we will start off with Guha's classification. Now first I'll have to tell you the Guha's story. As generally before introducing somebody, we should have to talk about their backgrounds and things like that. So we will be talking a bit about this man. You're all there? All fit, sir? Everybody? All the humanity out there? Many of us know M.N. Srinivas. Though not personally, we know him. M.N. Srinivas. Problem in South India is if you throw a stone on the road, it will definitely go and hit a Srinivas. Try it, you'll have it. M.N. Srinivas, I was telling you an essay in yesterday's class. What was that? An essay that he had written. Marriage and family. Tigo. Fine. Marriage and family among Kurgs of South India. I thought you would answer. Acha, iska matlab the entire story would take 2 minutes. So you should be patient. The story actually brings together Srinivas and Guha. Srinivas was somebody who hailed from Mysore, and then due to ill health and all that stuff, his education was here and there, but finally he went to Oxford. He was with, I'm talking about M.N. Srinivas. I'll link him up with Guha. I do a lot of linkings. I'll do that. Because that is where we find the animosity between different branches of anthropology. It looks very hilarious that the competition is not simply between one social science and the other. It is not simply between maybe sociology and anthropology, but then between the branches also there had been So Srinivas was the scholar who was trained under R.C. Brown. Great. And that's where we had used one term to talk about a genre of anthropology. We used one word there, if you could recall. Autoanthropology. If you could recall, Brown was the one who influenced Srinivas to study his own society as an anthropological study. And hence, Srinivas comes back to India. He starts to apply to various organizations. At that time, the one that was very popular was Anthropological Society of India. So he applies to Anthropological Society of India. And Guha was chairing the organization at that time. Guha was a physical anthropologist, and Srinivas was a social anthropologist. He actually started with sociology, then he came to social anthropologist. And we evangelized him into social anthropology. We actually changed his entire past. Now the problem is between a physical anthropologist and a social anthropologist. At that time when Srinivas had come back to India, that was early 1940s and late 1940s. At that time, people were of the opinion that anthropology is something like a science, a scientific discipline, and hence it makes sense to propagate, to work more on the so-called scientific kind of things in the curriculum. One being physical anthropology, the other being archaeology. Even if you attend any conferences, you will see that archaeologists behave as if they are people from the other world altogether, and social anthropologists are little fellows who are running here and there, making some kind of a noise. These consider themselves to be very mature people, very serious kind of people, talking all technical things, technical jargon, etc., trying to boast off things. And I'm not against anybody, but then in order to make you understand what is the kind of environment that we see in India. And that was where Srinivas was rather annoyed with Guha, because Guha did not give him a job. He had applied, he kept on applying and waiting. Those were the times when you used to write letters and wait for the postman to ring his bell, kind of. So waited, nothing happened. And later he started looking for patrons in the vicinity, in the Mysore state. And there in the Mysore state itself, he started working on various populations. One region that he started with was Coorg. And then he chose his own neighboring village. In the neighboring village he starts working. And he also actually, there is one book Srinivas had written. I don't want you to buy, don't buy. But then if possible, Google about this book and read the crux of it, only for the heck of it. A Remembered Village. The title of the book is Remembered Village. Village is something that was always an attractive title for all the sociocultural anthropologists of that particular time. Books on village, if you try knowing books on village, you'll get tons of titles there. Remembered Village is only one. There are titles like India's Villages, Indian Village, Life in Indian Village, Hindu Culture in Indian Village, Villages of India. You actually go on looking for the titles, you get all the kinds of descriptions out there. When I'm talking about village-centered writings, this was a time when anthropology was moving slightly away from, or maybe it is trying to find out a new area for operation, moving from tribal exclusiveness to a combination of tribe plus village studies. I hope you're following me. So most of the time when British were ruling, the writings were on the tribe. But when after independence, early independent times, we see the village being glorified by the early masters also. So that was a time when anthropologists were trying to move from tribal centeredness to tribe and village related combination in their writings. Are you there? Are you there? And slowly when village itself was losing its significance in the economy, we did not have patrons, we did not have funds, and hence we see that after 1970s, anthropology did not produce any named village studies. They almost died out. So we started to search for relevance of anthropology in the urban centers. We started writing on slum anthropology. We started writing on how globalization is impacting our Indian culture, kind of things. So village was actually slowly getting disappeared in the writings. So that was the story between Guha and Srinivas. Guha was against propagating some kind of encouraging a social anthropologist, whereas he was trying to do a bit of physical anthropology related work. Now, with that background, if I take you, this was that man, very young at that time, 1931. He was the census commissioner, 1931 census. Census is a very important event for countries like us. because census gives an opportunity to make claims. Census gives opportunity to make claims. You may actually return yourself as somebody belonging to a particular caste group, somebody belonging to a faith. So you are actually making it written formally and you are counted there. You should remember here, because he was a census commissioner, the complete list of people, whoever were surveyed in census, they were there at his disposal. He could actually deploy a good number of people to take up the measurements. So when compared to Risley, he has a very huge number of people that are measured. So data-wise, there was no dearth of it. But see, at the outset itself, I will have to tell you, because yesterday somebody had written, I tried to reply also. I don't know who it is. The question was, why were they called Aryo-Dravidians? Why did they not call them Dravido-Aryans? Was it because they felt like calling? See, Dravidian was the home group. Dravidian was the home group. If this Dravidian is getting an input from the outside group, we are trying to add that as a prefix. Generally, that has been the tendency. All that I did not explain in the reply of the mail. I only in the sleepy mode, I have written one odd sentence there, thinking that I would explain in the class. If it is Aryo-Dravidian, Dravidians are influenced by the Aryans. Skytho-Dravidians, Dravidians influenced by the Scythians. So it is generally that way. Now, naming is a very important process, sir. Naming is a very important process. How many of you don't like your name, like your own name? Wow, that's incredible. You love your name. Because that's also one pain the parents give to the children. That's also a pain people give to the children. I tell you an example. Sir, in the process of Sanskritization is you are trying to move up in the Hindu caste or Varna hierarchy. In the process of Sanskritization, one of the tendencies among the low castes is to name their children resembling the upper Varna or upper caste names, so that you are actually removing that barrier in the society, because of which the children or the offspring would be demarcated from the others. There is a possibility of differentiation and differential treatment. So now I have a very close friend who is called Papa Rao. Very close friend. We call him Popsy because he wants it that way. Papa Rao ante baledi kabatti. So he likes us calling Popsy. I feel that's more draconian than Papa Rao. His father was Stalin. His father was Stalin because Stalin's father was a communist leader. His name was Papa Rao. And Papa Rao had named his son as Stalin. Stalin actually repeats his father's name, and this fellow is given the name Papa Rao. So difficult, actually. And my own name, rather. I'm called that. I love my name tremendously. I have the second name also. I mean, this is the complete name, rather. Having born in a Persian family, that's a Persian name. By Sosin, we mean a flower of the heaven. A flower of the heaven, Tayyib, is holy. A holy flower of the heaven. I love my name so much. But the problem is, some of my students used this way. Maybe slowly doing that also. I don't mind even that, because that's an analgesic. So if at all you are tired of attending all the other classes, which bring you a lot of upper compartment gone, so I think that can bring back your own senses, whatever. Now, continuing with the naming process there. So we will be seeing several other examples of how Kshatriya titles were adopted by the low castes. Kshatriya titles, suppose you see the north coastal Andhra, the region where Kshatriyas are there, scheduled castes are there. There has been a tendency that among the scheduled castes, the naming process, instead of calling somebody as a Pentaya, you may actually give some title with the ending name as Raju, Krishnam Raju, son of Pentaya. Pentaya, actually you will be able to identify the caste. Krishnam Raju is the king, Raja, Krishnam Raju. Suppose you are using that name for your child. The first stigma in the society is broken. People wouldn't think at the first go that he may be a low caste. So the initial kind of differentiation will not be there until the time when the actual exhibition of the caste comes into picture. That's not cheating the society. That's not cheating the society. You're protecting your child by giving a name that can change his future. Now, coming up with the naming thing here, Guha was a fanciful person. The first problem that you might find with Guha is the kind of names that he had used for describing Indian races. Okay? You parallelly keep your book with you. Those are the names that are used by Guha. The 6 racial stocks: Negrito, Proto-Australoids, Mongoloids, Mediterranean, Western brachycephals. Don't mind, I didn't do that intentionally. Western brachycephals and Nordic. There are subcategories there. Mongoloids are 2 categories: Paleo-Mongoloid and Tibeto-Mongoloid. Mediterraneans are 3 categories: Paleo-Mediterranean, True Mediterranean. The second category is True Mediterranean. Third is Oriental types. Scribble this on a piece of paper so that you have a first exposure to the titles, and then we can keep looking into our books. Western brachycephals. Western brachycephals. Western broad-headed types. Achha, did you come across that name Western brachycephals in any other classification? Haddon's classification was there. Haddon had another variety of brachycephals. Southern brachycephals. So here you see only one variety, and Nordic. Sir, if at all I am not mentioning that it is India's racial classification with the titles, we will not be able to make out. Except for maybe a Mongoloid title. All the rest of them seem to be something that are not really there in the country or in the subcontinent. See, you will have to remember here 2 people, sir. One is Guha, the other is H.D. Sankalia. We mentioned him in any of our classes. H.D. Sankalia. H.D. Sankalia was an archaeologist. He was an archaeologist. See, both of them, I repeat, sir, I am here making a mention. We are trying to identify certain commonalities. Identifying commonalities is very, very important, sir. We see that every exam, one question of comparisons obviously occurs. And even for actually understanding the discipline, we should know similar personalities. Sankalia was coexisting with Guha. Naturally, good friends and then good kind of temperament there. I mean, similar kind of a temperament. Both of them always hailed scientific disciplines and looked down upon sociocultural anthropology. In fact, Guha looked down upon more when compared to Sankalia. Well, Sankalia could easily understand that I cannot write a story of a stone without incorporating a socio-cultural perspective. Nevertheless, both these people, Sankalia and Guha, had a commonality. The commonality was they wanted to establish Indian anthropology on par with European anthropology. Yeah, there, all of you, sir, please. I said, I repeat the last statement there. Guha and Sankalia tried to establish Indian anthropology on par with European anthropology. In that sense, Sankalia tried to through his digs meaning archaeological digs that we call. Sankalia tried to anthropology on par with European anthropology. In that, tried to establish Indian anthropology on par with European anthropology. In that sense, Sankalia tried to through his digs meaning archaeological. In that sense, tried to establish Indian anthropology. I said, I repeat the last statement there. Guha and Sankalia tried to establish Indian anthropology on par with European anthropology. In that sense, Sankalia tried to through his digs meaning archaeological digs that we call. H.D. Sankalia, through his archaeological digs, wanted to prove, look at your syllabus 1.8, paper 1. Sir, whenever you are feeling not really good in the class, just let me know. I don't want to give you pain. We can do several things that are much lighter. Okay, right now I'm doing very lighter thing, very, very lighter, rather light. 1.8 in paper 1 gives you the sequence of cultural ages, starting from Paleo to Meso, Neolithic, Chalcolithic, civilizations or Bronze Age cultures and maybe Iron Age. We see that graduation from Stone Age cultures to Metal Ages. And in your history books, you must have come across these titles and the time periods and all that stuff. What many of you may not be knowing is these stages of paleo, within paleo again, there are categories. You must have heard about lower Paleolithic, middle and upper Paleolithic. And then it goes and merges with the Mesolithic. That kind of a proper division of paleo into three subdivisions, three stages, followed by Mesolithic, was something that was very clearly established either in European anthropology, European archaeology, or African archaeology. Meaning there is a proper way in which you can study them, whether you are using an accurate dating method or maybe a relative dating method. Whatever may be the dating method you have in these continents. See, when I say Europe, I am not talking about England. That's a different story. I am talking about German region, French and the Soviet region, Caspian Sea region. Those places are very much known for evidences related to early cultures. You are there, sir? And they could, through various techniques. One, maybe what we call stratigraphic method. Stratigraphy you must have studied in your school. Stratigraphy, carbon dating, uranium dating and all that stuff. Stratigraphy is a very basic method. What we believe is if you are in the same strata, you belong to the same time. This is right if the layers are not moving up and down for whatever reason. If there's something like an earthquake, volcanic eruption, or maybe shifting of the plates one below the other and kind of things, you see that things are not in that order. For that, you need to have some other basic information about what could be the sequence in which the tool typologies must have evolved. And based on that, you might subject them to the relevant tests, maybe the absolute dating methods, and then you write a story. But in all this, the conclusion is, when it comes to Europe and Africa, we have enough amount of evidences of stone, evidences of bone, evidences of various other things such as horns and kind of things. So there are stone evidences, non-stone evidences to prove the existence, the evolution of man. Are you there? When it comes to India, the problem I was telling yesterday, we do not have, unfortunately, the bone evidences, human bone evidences, fossil evidences are a rarity in the country. We have very little bone evidences. We are going to see in the classes of archaeology last year when we have found some bone evidences. That is going to be very important information that you can use in your exam. Based on that, they might give certain regions as questions. Now, the struggle of H.D. Sankalia was, in the limited sense he was trying to do this. Wherever they were trying to do the archaeological studies, many of those places were experiencing shifting of the layers. Whether you see the foothills of the Himalayas, the Shivalik region where we had found one of the fossil evidences, or the Deccan region which is known for producing huge volume of the stone tool evidence. So you have to actually tell the story of man where there is no evidence of man. That's a very tough task. Sankalia had to struggle hard to put all the bits and pieces together to say that India also had the same lower, middle and upper Paleolithic followed by Mesolithic, but we have altogether a different variety of ours, but we are on par with the others. This he could establish when he was alive, 1960s. You're there? People from Pune, no, I repeatedly say this, that you don't miss out visiting his places. All the things that he had used, they have properly put in the museum. You can spend a lot of time. This man is the second one who nurtured this fashion of using European titles of Negrito, Proto-Australoid, Mongoloid, Mediterranean. There I stop. Mediterranean was the term that he had used for Dravidian. Mediterranean was the term he had used instead of Dravidian. Dravidian was already used by Risley, and Haddon was calling them what? In the Deccan tribes? In the Deccan tribes, pre-Dravidian, Dravidian and all that stuff. So what is happening there? Both these people had used the title Dravidian. Risley used it maybe as a racial entity alone. Haddon criticized that Dravidian is not a racial title, it is a linguistic title. In spite of saying that, he also ended up using Dravidian more or less as a racial term. This is what we were saying in yesterday's class. Guha gave an alternative. He was using Mediterranean, the title, also to indicate that there were several semblances between people of the Deccan region with the people living along the Mediterranean Sea. Yeah, there. At one point of time, Guha was a 60 marker. So you can understand his capability. If Guha had to be written, you had to first rip Risley apart, talk against Haddon. Then you glorify this man, introduce him for the kind of huge volume of measurements that he had taken. And it is not simply sufficient to measure, you will have to properly organize them, use proper statistical methods. Sir, I should here tell you something about the Second Indian Science Congress of 1930s. The Silver Jubilee of Indian Science Congress, 1930s, to be specific, 1931. Indian Science Congress Silver Jubilee was an opportunity for all the scientific anthropologists to meet. I repeat, we are talking about one very important occasion, Silver Jubilee celebrations of Indian Science Congress. Even today, Indian Science Congress is an esteemed meeting that goes on, conference. At that conference, Acha, you know this man, Mahal Nobis? Mahal Nobis. Who? Second 5-year plan and sir, Indian Statistical Studies. So you understand that he is associated with statistics. He's also associated with Nehru. That's a secondary story. Silver Jubilee of Indian Science Congress had presented a very important paper that was drafted by Mahal Nobis and D.N. Majumdar. And that was titled as Use of Statistical Methods in Indian Census. Use of Statistical Methods in Indian Census. Written primarily by an anthropologist. I have incorporated in one of your books this particular topic. I named it as Use of Anthropologists in Census Operations. We actually have this from the times before the independence, long time before independence. Anthropologists are actually involved in writing the census. 1931 was also an opportune moment. An anthropologist was using all the data in giving these details, and hence, keep looking into your booklet, Negrito. Good volume actually, no? 370. So do not actually worry much about too many books. Something is written there. Huh? Negrito features are there. I am more concerned about the examples. Khadar, Panian, Hulayan, Irula. That's how they. The bottom two pictures, left side. Khadar, Panian, Hulayan, Irula. That's how they. The bottom two pictures, left side one and the right side bottom, were presented by Guha himself. The top is the recent one, the Irula girl there. So you can actually see the frizzly filfil hair, and the kind of nose pattern, the kind of lips. And so that's where those. You have some of the things there, short stature. I have picked up from your book only. The black color, skin, black woolly hair, thick lips, I'm so sorry, there's a printer there. Thick lips, broad noses, and several other people out there. Today we see Jarawas, and several other Andaman Islanders, Sentinelese. They are presented as Negrito racial stock. Okay, may I go? You'll only be scribbling the additional names there. కాదు అలా చిరాకు పడితే ఎలాగా Kadar, Irula, Palian, Angaminaga, Jarava, I'm so sorry, spelling error again, Jarava, Onge, Centinalis. Jarava, J is missing. J జారిపోయింది నేనేం చేయాలి జారవా ఓంగే సెంటినలీస్ ఇన్ షార్ట్ అండమాన్ ఐలాండర్స్. Have you heard of a language called Bo in Andaman? That was in news. We'll talk about it. Can I go? Negrito of Andaman Islands and southern tip of India are an example to show that as you go close to the equator, you have higher pigmentation in the skin, in the body. So by now we have come to our understanding. If the question is Negrito racial stock in India, we should be saying that it's a controversial topic right from the beginning. The first major racial classification of Risley had neglected or did not recognize the existence of a Negrito, and hence they did not make a comment. Risley did not make a comment on Negrito. But when it comes to Haddon, he considered that Negrito are existing in the country. He presented the basic features of them and said that these could be the earliest populations of Indian subcontinent. Negrito could be the earliest populations of Indian subcontinent. And there was a competition between pre-Dravidians and Negritos in his case. He was saying that one of them could be the earliest inhabitants here. And Haddon was also of the opinion that Negrito, because they resemble the African lot, it indicates that possibly the ancestors of Homo sapiens, ancestors of Negrito, must have traveled from Africa to Indian subcontinent in that long journey in which they were finally going to Indonesia and the islands out there. That's a very beautiful narration, actually. The belief that, man's ancestors were born in Africa. From Africa, they had traveled and traveled. They crossed the continent, came into Asia, and in Asia they started, they went through. Part of them had drifted into Indian subcontinent. Maybe their offspring emerged as somebody like Negrito racial elements in India, and maybe possibly some of them also were into the region which got separated later as Andaman Islands. And then from the mountain passes, they must have gone into the eastern part of the continent, Indonesia and the nearby islands. That is going to be one other story we would see. There is something called radiation of early genus Homo. We are going to see how the early genus Homo had radiated. In other words, popularly it is called out of Africa theory. One question that we are expecting in this year's exam, that is out of Africa theory. We are going to talk about it, whether it is the ancestor of Homo erectus had come, or was it erectus, was it somebody else? That is going to be one other interesting question. You may add that to the list of questions there. That is out of Africa theory. Critically analyze out of Africa theory. Critically analyze out of Africa theory. Critically analyze out of Africa theory, presenting different opinions regarding human origins and spread. You're there for a story? We don't call it a criticism, actually. We look at that as Guha is trying to add additional explanation to what Haddon was saying. Guha was not criticizing Haddon. See, it's all a personal affair. Whom you criticize, whom you do not. That could be, we don't call it a criticism. Elsewhere, Guha says that, see, the entire population of Negrito may not have got admixed with the others. In certain regions, the exclusivity was there. For example, you see Andaman region, that's an exclusive region. But when it comes to the southern part of India, the peninsula region, even if we found Negrito, that's a variant in Negrito. Because you see, geographical proximity will lead to not simply cultural adulteration, but biological adulteration also. That's how even if Negritos were existing, like Pandiyans are there, even if they are existing, they are not similar to the Andaman Islanders. So Andaman are considered to be relatively more original when compared to the South Indian Negrito. That's the reason why people prefer to call the South Indian Negrito as Negroid rather than Negrito. This is all the argument that you would be presenting there. क्या था? Story था. हाँ. Continuing with what he had asked. Sir, every continent, every anthropology, every nation for that matter, every school of anthropology, whether you call French anthropology, German anthropology, American anthropology, Ethiopian anthropology, Kenyan, Indian, every anthropology without any bias, we can say that all of them had tried to prove that human existence was there in their territory. You may think no big deal, but that is the big deal. If at all you are able to present with evidences that human past was there with you, a lot of scientific other discoveries and then various things would start emerging from you. You are the originator of the story. Now I am telling you one story which tells us that it is not every time true that scientists can be trusted. I said something really vital. We believe that scientific disciplines are more rational, more true when compared to the non-scientific disciplines which can be brushed aside as nonsense. Nevertheless, the following story can establish this fact that scientific community can actually derail the civilization, derail the disciplines. The example that we are presenting here is actually something that had hijacked anthropology for more than 50 years. Generally, సినిమాలు అలాగే చెప్తాం కదా, రాబోతుంది అలా రాసి అలవాటు అయిపోయి. Acha, look at your syllabus once again, 1.8, 1.6. You have somebody called Astrolo. What is the title there for Astrolo? What's the complete title given? 1.6. Astrolo with his genes. Yeah. Pleistocene hominids in South and East Africa. We don't know who hominids are. Right now we're not bothered. Pleistocene hominids in South and East Africa called Australopithecines. So that was the term that we are introducing today for you. We will come back to do with Guha. We'll take a small detour. We are not adulterating the topic, sir. I'll just come back in a while. I'm talking about this person, Australopithecines. Astralo is the name of the genus. Now, I'm more concerned about this word. There was an unquestioned acceptance in the scientific community at one point of time that Astralo had given rise to whom? What's the next man? Homo erectus. Who gave rise to Neanderthal? Gave rise to sapiens. This was the very basic picture of human evolution. Who was there? Who were the fossil men before Homo sapiens? Now, I would finish the story in a couple of minutes. Astralo was that individual who lived for a very long time. Right now, the evidences show that he was there from 5.5 million years ago to somewhere about 2 million years ago. So you can say 6 million years to 2 million years. There's a huge time period. From 2 million years, we start to see Homo erectus, and what was happening there, we would be talking about it later. But here you understand that Australo was not one single fellow like Homo sapiens. There were so many varieties of Australo. There were so many varieties of Australo. One of them had gone into erectus. There's so many varieties of Australo. We will be drawing those pictures later. Now here you'll have to understand that I'm using this word Australopithecines to show that Australopithecus, which is a genus, has so many varieties. All these varieties put together are called Australopithecines. Like how, in the case of Homo erectus, your syllabus mentions Homo erectus javanicus, Homo erectus pekinensis, Homo erectus of Narmada. When I'm giving all those titles, those are either the regional variants or a species within Homo erectus. When I'm saying species within Homo erectus, maybe they are independent species in themselves, where Narmada man cannot cohabit with somebody like Javanicus. They're a totally different genre. Or if I see them as regional variants, maybe whenever there's an opportunity to come together, they intermingle and give rise to somebody else. Are you there? Now, in this particular case of Australo, we are going to see that there were different Australo varieties at different points of time. At one point of time, one Australo variety was there, who became something, and finally, erectus. You're there? Huh? Australo is now called Australopithecines. When I'm using the word scenes, I mean that it is a complete collection of different Australo species. One of them maybe possibly gave rise to genus Homo. You're there? So in the future classes, when we come up with the title Australopithecus, about whom we should write, if at all the question is Australopithecine, whom we are going to mention in that complete list, that we will be dealing at that point of time. My whole and sole concern here is about somebody called Dawson. There was one British scientist called Dawson. So Dawson was that paleontologist who wanted to prove that Britain also had human evolutionary past. We are talking about a time when there were no dating methods available. So that was the early 1900s. To be more specific, 1920s. At which point of time one Australofossil they had found out. Australofossil was found in Africa. People were so jubilant that we found somebody who was walking on the 2 feet, though not in erect posture. We found the ancestor of genus Homo. That was the kind of celebration mode in which people were. But at point of time, one Australofossil they had found out. So that was the early 1900s. Possibly gave rise to genus Homo. You're there? So in the future classes, when we come up with the title Australopithecus, about whom we should write, if at all the question is Australopithecine, whom we are going to mention in that complete list, that we will be dealing at that point of time. My whole and sole concern here is about somebody called Dawson. There was one British scientist called Dawson. So Dawson was that paleontologist who wanted to prove that Britain also had human evolutionary past. We are talking about a time when there were no dating methods available. So that was the early 1900s. To be more specific, 1920s. At which point of time one Australofossil they had found out. Australofossil was found in Africa. People were so jubilant that we found somebody who was walking on the 2 feet, though not in erect posture. We found the ancestor of genus Homo. That was the kind of celebration mode in which people were. But suddenly this man brought one evidence. Now, here you will have to remember something. That in the human evolution, there was a popular belief, which we still believe in. The belief is that something happened on the trees. We were all there on the trees, happy-go-lucky kind of, jab jo mila, tod ke kha rahe kind of. Suddenly something happened, huge population, competition, the weaker ones push it down. We later proved that neglected stone becomes the cornerstone. We were thrown down. When we came down, we were walking on the 4 feet. We were quadrupeds rather. And because we had to see our enemy from a distance, we started to stand erect. We started to slowly stand erect, at least occasionally. So maybe Australo started with that exercise. Or Australo was the first offspring or first generation offspring of the people who were quadrupeds at one point of time. In that process, this man emerged with the 2 feet that were still in a bent posture. So the popular belief at that time and even now is that in the process of human evolution, first changes came in the limbs. The first quicker changes came in the limbs, and finally, when the genus Homo had originated, the finalization happened with the skull. I'm not saying that skull was waiting for the rest of the body to be evolved. Parallelly, though changes were occurring, in the later part of the time, see, Homo erectus was an individual who looked like human, more or less like human, as far as the postcranial features are concerned. He was able to stand on the 2 feet, similar to us. Skeleton was almost similar there. The bone ratios were almost similar. But the major change we could find in the skull, in the cranial capacity, to be more specific. His cranial capacity averaged to less than 1000 cc. And in the process, we see that after erectors, the next people who had come, they were experiencing change in the cranial features, increase in the cranial capacity, and how the organization of dentition was, how the orbits are, how the forehead was, and all that stuff. So when we are going to see all these evolutions of the fossil men, we are going to observe how the postcranial features were changing, at what stage cranial features started to dominate in change. So after erectors, the postcranial features almost ceased. What was changing, we will see later. But then this man, Dawson, wanted to prove 2 things. One was that Britain also had the evidence of early man. But till then, Britain did not have any such evidence. The problem was the British government was ruling the entire world. From entire world, they were unearthing the evidences. In their own territory, they couldn't get one. It's an insult. He took it very personally. So what he did was, he manufactured an evidence. He fixed an evidence. And this place is very popular. If time permits, you visit on your website. Piltdown. In your internet, you can see Piltdown. Piltdown. Piltdown is the place where he had unearthed the evidence. At one point of time in the UPSC syllabus, Piltdown fossil was a short question. I'll tell you how the manufacturing had happened. He had to show, 1, that Britain had an evidence. 2, he wanted to prove that skull had evolved first, and later the postcranial features. So he had to put certain evidence that was pre-human